Before I tell my story, I just want to say I'm aware of how dumb it is to do stuff like this, and I probably won't be doing this for a long time after what happened a few months ago. Anyway, I just really needed to post this because I don't know who else to tell. About half a year ago, I had the scariest experience of my life. For context, I'm a dumb teenage boy who sneaks out every now and then just to walk around at night. I find something very peaceful walking around after dark, but my parents have never let me stay out past sunset. So, for about a year, whenever school gets hard, or just life in general gets stressful, I sneak out and just walk around for about 2 hours or so. Anyway, the night I'm talking about began with me deciding to go for another 2 a.m. ritual. I grabbed a sweatshirt, got on my shoes once I was outside, and hopped the fence to freedom. After I was safely away from my neighborhood, I took one of my usual routes, which is cutting through another neighborhood and walking onto a winding road, where I then walk down the middle of it and head towards a circle of shops and fast food restaurants. I was probably there for a solid chunk of time, just walking in the loop and ending up sitting on a bench. At some point, I picked up a plastic spoon on the ground and started to grind it against the pavement until the spoon part was half gone out of boredom. This is important for later. I was chilling there for a bit before I decided to walk around a bit more, and I eventually ended up at a park like 10 minutes away from my neighborhood, where I usually end the night just staring off into the sky. The park itself creeps me out sometimes, because at night there's a huge ring of trees surrounding all sides of you, and anyone could watch from the woods. Anyway, shit starts to get real here, because I'm staring up into existence feeling like a philosopher while I'm lying on one of those table benches, when I hear an old man whistle. I probably shot up, because I had never had another human interaction on one of these walks, and I see this old man dimly illuminated by a streetlight by the only entrance of the park. I had seen him before. He's this tall, skinny white guy that walks around our town all day, and I would honestly think he was homeless if he wasn't wearing the same fancy button-up and cargo pants every day. Me and my mom have talked about him. We think he's mentally disabled and probably lives with a caretaker. I even had an interaction with him once. About a year ago, I was walking home in broad daylight when I passed the man who was at the time sitting on a bench. The dude just looks at me and says, "Jesus loves you," with a weird little smirk on his face. I responded with an awkward, "I know," even though I'm an atheist and didn't really think much of it. Anyway, back to the park at night. I just stare at him in that empty parking lot, probably way longer than I should have, because he was already creeping me the hell out. I imagine we're staring at each other for a real long time before he slowly starts walking towards me, and at this point, I'm frozen in fear, because why the fuck is this old white geezer out with me at like 3 a.m. in an empty park? I'm standing up at this point, and he gets close to me and just gives me this cheeky grin like he knows something I don't know yet, and I'm just gawking at him like a fucking buffoon. Have you ever scoffed at a book or movie when the main character is frozen in fear? Well, I have, and I never will again, because at this point I'm more frozen than I've ever been in my life. At some point, after probably like 10 seconds of awkward standing, he just kind of half pets and half grabs my shoulder and reaches into his pocket to pull out a plastic spoon. The same plastic spoon that I was holding about an hour ago at the shop plaza. He just kinda tucks it in my front sweatshirt pocket, and I guess something just makes my mind snap out of my frozen stance, because I absolutely fucking book it to the public bathroom and lock the door. I'm now in this dimly lit bathroom in the middle of the night, and I'm guessing at this time it was past 3 in the morning. I assumed that maybe he would leave once he saw me in my state of panic, but honestly I don't think he ever left. I ended up looking closer at that plastic spoon, and it was altered. Have you ever seen one of those viral AI-generated images where it looks completely normal at a glance, but you can't identify a single thing? If not, just search up "name one thing in this image." Now imagine that, except a word carved onto the plastic spoon, but you can't read it, or even identify any of the letters. I think I sat in that locked bathroom for over half an hour just contemplating every single life decision I've made in the past year that led up to this nightmare. To be clear, I had no phone, or any way of contacting someone because my parents had installed Life 360 on my phone, and they can see my location whenever. I also had no watch or access to the outside to tell the time. I ended up gaining the courage to unlock the door, just to absolutely rocket myself toward the exit of the park. Before I turned the corner though, I looked back for a second and saw a figure sitting on the bench that was right next to the bathroom. This senile old man had waited outside for an hour just to see me one more time. I'm being completely honest when I say I held a full sprint until I got back to my neighborhood, where I finally caught my breath behind a bush and then snuck back into my house. I haven't gone out at night since that experience, and I don't know if I'll ever sneak out again. I still have the spoon buried somewhere in my wardrobe, but I haven't looked at it in months. Sometimes I think about how long he was following me, and if it was an isolated incident, or if he had been stalking me on other late-night trips. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on the matter, unless you're here to lecture me about my actions, because trust me, I've already learned. Okay, I want to start by saying, this actually happened. This isn't some, quote, creepy story or something I made up. I still have trouble sleeping alone because of it. Even now, years later at 27, I check every closet and lock every door at least 3 times before bed. So yeah, here's why I don't stay home alone anymore. I was a 16, almost 17-year-old female, living with my mom and my little brother Ryan. He was like 7 at the time. My mom worked late-night shifts at a nursing home, so I was usually the one watching Ryan when she was gone. Since he was younger, he'd fall asleep by 8, and I'd just do my thing, watch TV, scroll on my phone, eat junk food. You know, typical teenager stuff. We lived in this little 1-story house on the edge of some woods. It wasn't totally isolated, but there weren't many neighbors nearby either. I used to love having the house to myself at night, until all of this happened. So, the first time I noticed something weird, it was small. I was in bed around 11 p.m., scrolling through my phone, when I heard this shuffling sound. Like someone dragging their feet on the carpet. I froze. Ryan was asleep, and my mom wasn't home. I sat there, holding my breath, listening. It was quiet for a few seconds, and then I heard it again, a soft scuffing noise, like someone was moving really slow through the living room. I grabbed my phone and crept out of my room, my heart pounding. I checked the front door. It was locked. The windows, locked. Nothing looked out of place. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The hall closet was open, just a crack. We never left that door open, ever. I stood there for a second, my whole body on edge. I wanted to just turn around and go back to my room, but my dumbass decided to check. I pulled the door open fast. Nothing, just coats and shoes. I remember laughing at myself. I was just being paranoid. Still, I locked the closet door before I went back to bed. A few nights later, I woke up out of nowhere. At first, I didn't know why. Then I realized I could hear breathing. I was laying there completely still, my whole body locked up in fear. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside my room. I grabbed my phone, my hand shaking, and turned on the flashlight. I shined it around. Nothing. The room was empty, and the closet was closed. I barely slept the rest of that night. After that, I started feeling weird all the time, like I was being watched. Like whenever I turned my back, someone was just out of sight, peeking around a corner. I told my mom, but she just brushed it off. Then about a week later, she woke me up after coming home early from work. She looked off. She asked me why the back door was unlocked, and I assured her that I had locked it, but she told me that it was unlocked, and she had to just lock it herself. I knew without a doubt that I had locked it the night before, but I didn't argue. That night, I was on edge. I kept my bedroom door locked and my phone in my hand, just in case. I fell asleep at some point, but I woke up to more breathing, and just like that gut feeling that someone's watching you. My whole body went cold. I sat up, barely breathing, and listened. I noticed my closet door was open, which was also weird. I turned on my flashlight just in time to see it swing open another inch. And that's when I saw him. I swear to you, there was a man crouched inside my closet, skin pale as hell, hair greasy and matted. He was too thin, like he hadn't eaten in weeks, and he was grinning at me. I don't even remember getting out of bed. One second I was staring at him, and the next I was slamming my door shut and running to Ryan's room. Ryan woke up crying as I grabbed him, and we ran out of the house, my phone already dialing 911. The cops got there really fast. They found him still in my closet. It turns out, he had been living in our crawl space for weeks. He had gotten in through a loose vent in the basement, and had been sneaking into the house at night, watching us sleep, taking food when we weren't looking. But the worst part? When they pulled him out, they found something tucked behind my coats. A knife. The police said he was probably waiting for the right moment. I try not to think about what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. I swear this actually happened, and it fucks with me to this day. So, to the man in my closet, let's never ever meet again. When I was around 22 years old, I had a scary encounter while staying at a hotel for a job. Around 2010, I was working for a traveling photography group that took church directory photos. Each photographer drove separately from all over the place. So, I was in Harlan, Iowa at the time. I was staying at a hotel along with other photographers who joined with me. I believe there was 4 of us, 2 guys, a girl, and myself. One morning, I went down to breakfast and I was watching the TV in the hotel breakfast area. Someone else was also down there with me, nearby, a guy. When he looked at me, I said good morning as I do wherever I go, just to be friendly. He said it back and we had just a polite exchange, just something you would do with a stranger you never thought you would see again. He mentioned that he was staying there with his team for a construction job. Eventually I go to leave and I say something very casual like, "Have a good one, see you later." He said something like we could hang later. I didn't think anything of it and just brushed it off like, yeah, maybe, I guess. I don't remember if it was the same day or not, but as I didn't work until 11 a.m., I tend to work from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., give or take, depending on the size of the church, etc. I decided to go take a nap since I didn't sleep well the night before. While laying in my room, I kept receiving phone calls to my room phone. I wasn't used to getting calls like that, like ever, so I just picked up. I would say hello, but nobody would answer. After a few times, I eventually just took the receiver off and placed it beside the phone so it would stop ringing. When it was time to get up and leave, I left my room and saw the guy was standing there in the hall. I waved casually, still not thinking anything of it. He asked where I was going, and I said I had to go to work. My friend showed up, the female photographer, and I went with her to her car as I was going to ride with her to the church. I told her about getting the strange phone calls, and she mentioned that she did as well. Later that night, there was a thunderstorm. My photographer group and I stood by the hotel lobby door watching the lightning. It was thundering and extremely dark. There were even chances of tornadoes, so we were keeping tabs with each other. Eventually, I go to my room for the night, and I hear a knock on my door. I didn't really want to answer it, however I did, cracking the door to see who it was. It was the guy. He talked about how I said we could hang out. I told him I was too tired after working all day and I needed to sleep. I shut the door. Now, I can't remember if this was the next morning or still night, but I recall him knocking again, but I just wouldn't answer. I pretended to either be out or sleeping. I called my mom and started talking to her. I told her what was happening, and although I was scared, I acted like I wasn't when I was speaking with her. Suddenly, I had a weird feeling. I whispered to my mom, "Mom, hold on a second. I need to check something." I tiptoe as quietly over to my room door as possible. I look out the peephole, and I see him. I then see him turn his head to my door as if he was listening for something. My heart started to race. I then saw him move to the side. You know how the wall sometimes goes in for the doors, so there's like an indentation in the hallway for each room? Well, he goes to the wall away from the room that juts out. I think he thought he was hiding, because he would try to lean his head around the corner of the jet-out portion, as if listening for something. I walked to the furthest side of the room quietly, and whispered to my mom about how I'm scared. I then called the front desk to complain like my mom suggested. I can't remember if I also texted my friend or called her, but she also complained to the front desk about the various phone calls she received. Eventually, we were given new rooms, and the construction group manager was told by the hotel about one of his guys, and that the creepy guy was told to stay away from us. I even told some of the church people about the situation, and they all said if we needed to stay with them that we could. All very nice, but still all strangers to me. I didn't trust anyone at that point. I'm not sure what happened to him, as I didn't see him after that. I was a little jealous of my friend because she ended up with a hot tub in her room, and I didn't, but I guess it was fine. However, after that, I was more aware and careful with who I talked to and what I said. This happened 2 days ago, and I'm still very shaken up about it. I was with my brother and father. We were just at the immigration department in HK to sort something out for us. Further context, I'm a 20-year-old female, and I'm not an HK local. It was getting late, and my dad suggested we start taking the bus back now to eat closer to the apartment area, where most good places would be closed by then. Midway, there was a stop that my brother suggested we get off and find food. We all agreed. I started to desperately need the toilet, and so my brother pointed out the closest McDonald's we could see. A big mistake. We go in. My brother and dad are waiting downstairs. I was under the assumption that, well, if there's no toilet downstairs, then there should be one up. If not, I'll leave and find another place. I walk up the stairs and look around, somewhat pacing as I desperately needed to pee. The McDonald's worker seemed to have spotted me and was looking at me, almost expecting me to bother him. I asked him if there was a toilet. He said, "Toilet? Through the door, turn left and take a lift up." It's an ominous brown door with no signs or anything at the front. He's the worker, so I assume he knows better than me. I open it, and what the fuck? It's very dark and run down. Completely different vibe to the modern McDonald's. It was extremely quiet, too. As soon as the door closed, it was almost soundproofed. All the bustling loud noises in the McDonald's had completely stopped. The room was just very dark with minimal white light. There were multiple doors that appeared locked in the building. I didn't explore much, as I thought it was maybe a staff room. I turned the left corner as instructed, and there was indeed a lift. I assume maybe this is just a very odd passage to a shopping mall, which isn't too uncommon in Hong Kong, and surely how bad can this be if there's a lift? I press the lift and step in. Suddenly I hear the door open, and the worker that directed me goes into the lift with me as well. I notice that he's holding a black bin bag that is filled with little to nothing. I assume that maybe he just needs to put this out and is helping me find the toilet. Kill two birds with one stone. I ask him what floor do I press, and he presses the second floor. Once the door closes, it's a bit quiet and awkward. I glance at him for a second. He was wearing a COVID face mask, one eye looking forwards, and he had a lazy eye looking to the side. Suddenly, he says, "Long ho ling," which translates to "you're very pretty" in Cantonese. At this point, it's very awkward, and I just said a quiet thank you to not agitate him. I'm wagering if I actually needed to pee this badly now. The lift stops, finally. I was fully expecting a shopping mall when the lift doors open. That wasn't the case. The doors opened, and it was just a dark, quiet, very run-down, narrow hallway of doors. It was so dark with infinite corners. Not a single person was there but us. I couldn't tell what the building was, an odd cross of abandoned apartment doors and office doors. At this point, we're both still stood in the lift, and my entire body is in a flight or fight response, as this whole situation was making me fear the worst. The worker gestures me to get off at this lift, and almost wants to continue walking me to the toilet. I quickly make an excuse of, "I've already bothered you so much from your work, you can just point at the direction and I'll find it, promise." He points to the right and tells me to go through there and that's the toilet. I thank him and then go the complete opposite direction he told me. The whole place was like a fucking maze, narrow hallways with doors. I got curious and pushed at one of them, and it was locked. At this point, I'm really trying to stall enough time to appear I went to the toilet before getting the lift back down. I get a call from my brother now, a very angry call asking why I'm taking so long and where I am. I explain I don't know where I am, I'm trying to find my way back. I hang up, and I'm getting increasingly more scared as this place is giant. As I mentioned, like an abandoned office with no signs or anything, while being extremely dark with minimal light. The walls were all torn down too. It's just so quiet and run down. There was no way a functioning toilet was up here. I'm really panicking now and trying to find my way back to the lift, scared shitless. My initial discomfort of desperately needing to pee turned to desperately wanting to leave. I calmed myself down a bit with breathing exercises and tried to recollect the steps I took. Finally found the lift and quickly pressed back down. As I got in, I remember pressing the close button so much. The lift takes me back down to the hallway, but by accident I walked forward instead of turning right. What the fuck? There are even more doors, 4 to 5 doors next to each other. But what was most strange was the fact the doors were all facing this large glass panel wall between the McDonald's. I was able to look at the McDonald's and the people eating, but they didn't notice I was there at all. I walked back and turned right this time, through the door. I was finally in the McDonald's again, but that quote glass wall on my end appeared to be a large mirror in the McDonald's. It was a double mirror. I looked around, and there was no sight of the McDonald's worker either. I quickly walked down the McDonald's, and I see my dad and brother. My dad asked if I was okay, as I looked really pale. I said I'll tell him when we're out. I asked him if he saw the worker again when they were waiting, describing him as a man with a mask on and a lazy eye. My dad shook his head and said he didn't see any worker when he checked upstairs for me earlier. My heart dropped as soon as I heard that. The worker was still up the lift. My dad also said, "Don't tell me you went through that lift. I opened the door and walked through a bit to find you. It was pretty scary. Why were there so many doors in that glass? I thought there was something wrong, so I got out immediately." Bear in mind, my dad is built as fuck. He then sent my brother to go look for me. Not sure why, my brother is pretty skinny and unathletic in comparison. He opened the brown door just to see and noped the fuck out. He described it as looking like the back rooms with the doors next to each other back to back. He did not want to walk in there to explore. I will never go to the toilets alone again. Seeing a McDonald's will forever hold this memory for me. When I was approximately 20 years old, I'm female, I subleased a friend's place for the summer. It was one of those houses built for college students in a subdivision that's all college students. The house had 4 bedrooms and I rented 1 bedroom, but the other roommates were out of town for the summer as well, so I was alone. Coincidentally, one of my friends had a younger sibling that needed to find a home for her rescue pit for the summer. I've had boxers all my life, and I always loved pit bulls. I'd always been curious. To this day, I'm so glad I had that dog. I swear she saved me, possibly my life. I'm obsessive about 2 things because of who I am as a person: cleaning and locking doors / setting alarms when I leave or I'm alone, which meant I was locking and setting that alarm a lot that summer because I was alone. The first night I had that pit bull, her name was June. I was a little nervous if I'm being honest. I didn't know until my friend dropped the dog off, but my friend's sibling had just rescued this pit, like less than a month ago. Clearly, I should have asked more questions. I was nervous because the dog was a bit apprehensive about me, and fresh out of the shelter or rescue, wherever my friend's sibling found her. This was clear by the way she interacted with me and the home surroundings. It was clear June had been abused. This dog had scars all over her body, and by the looks of it, had semi-recently given birth. Also worth noting, June was hulked out. This dog was absolutely jacked. I had rehabbed a dog before, so I felt I was up for the challenge. After all, I had the entire summer, and it was just June and I. Note, this house had one of those magnetic fob locks, a door at the front of the house which faced the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. There was also a door at the back of the house which faced a sort of alley where I parked my car. I locked any door anytime I used it, as well as the door to the bedroom whenever I slept. I had June in the bedroom with me. There was an alarm on the house, but the girls that actually lived there, remember I was subleasing, never set it up and didn't have the desire to do so, which meant I was totally relying on those locks. Night 1. I get into bed, direct June to the comfy, plush bed I'd put together for her. I laid her toys on it, super soft blankets, the works. I guess June decided, nah, because the next thing I knew she was in bed with me, facing me with her head, and all those teeth, a few inches from mine. I barely slept because I was so scared I'd accidentally roll onto her or something, scare her and end up with my face eaten off. Yeah, I know it's silly, but it's what was going through my mind as I laid awake, staring at this massive, absolute unit of a dog. Night 2. Same thing, except I fall asleep quicker. I woke up the next morning to June staring directly into my soul. I guess we were bonding. Night 3. We spent the evening watching movies and snuggling. I shared my pizza crusts and she was definitely feeling the love because she finally let me scratch her belly and started to act like a puppy, and less like the recently released inmate. Morning after night 3. I wake up and it's still really early in the morning, as in, it's like 6:30 or 7 a.m. I usually got up around 9 for my class at noon. As I'm coming out of my sleepy stupor, trying to get my bearing and understanding why the hell I'm awake so early, I clock June. June is absolutely snarling at the bedroom door, body slamming the door, and sniffing the base of the door, lunging over and over at the handle of the door. It was absolutely terrifying, but I wasn't afraid of her. I quickly realized something or someone is right outside my bedroom door and jiggling the door handle, which I had locked. I do live in Texas, so I grabbed my 12 gauge that I hid under my bed and racked it. It's a very, very old and very loud gun. When I racked the gun, everything became very quiet. Me. Who's there? Random person. Maintenance. We're maintenance. We didn't mean to scare you. We're here to fix the dishwasher. I didn't put in a maintenance request. The dishwasher is in the kitchen on the first floor. Yeah, we were told no one was here. I'm training a new guy and thought I'd show what most of the houses look like inside. At this point, June is losing her ever-loving mind, and I'm armed, kind of annoyed that these idiots had woken me up so early. Then it dawns on me, I had deadbolted the doors. Maybe the maintenance people had some way to bypass the deadbolts, I honestly don't know. This was a time when the magnetic fobs were kind of new, or new to apartments near campus anyway. I should have been more scared, but I could tell these guys were shitting their pants between hearing the monster on the other side of the door and my gun racking. So I cracked the door a smidge. Just enough for them to see the gun, June foaming at the mouth, and so that I could get a good look at their uniform, to confirm whether they were real servicemen or not. Weirdly enough, they didn't have on any uniforms. There were 3 men. 2 men looked like they had it rough. They were maybe in their early 40s, and the other guy was in his mid-20s. All 3 of these men were dirty, like they had been sleeping outside maybe. Their clothes appeared rather clean, but they had not seen a shower in a hot minute. I tell them to leave or that I'd open the door and let June out. I tell them that I'll call the front office and clear this up, but for now they needed to leave. Sure enough, all 3 men turned around and got out of my house. Once the men left, I checked the doors, and the back door was unlocked. I had checked it the night before. There was no chance I had forgotten to lock it. I called the front office the minute it was open at 8 a.m., to which they said they hadn't dispatched any maintenance men that day, and asked me for a description of the men. I'm not sure if they were ever caught, but I certainly hope so. I had never been so scared in my life. I'd used my gun when hunting, but never once pointed it at a person. In that specific housing complex, at least 5 women were attacked in the weeks before this encounter, so I was definitely on edge. I kept June the entire summer, would have tried to adopt her, as we were definitely bonded and I knew she had my back. I felt so safe with her. But the place I was moving into wasn't a place she'd be happy, as it didn't have a yard and it was really small. To this day, I'm convinced June saved me from something truly horrible. I'm an alcoholic, and I've been sober for 9 years. That is, without a doubt, my proudest accomplishment. I started getting help during my sophomore year of high school. Looking back, I'm so grateful for the timing. If I had hit rock bottom later, things would have only gotten worse. My parents actually transferred me to a different school so I could start fresh and meet new people. By the time I turned 18, a few months before graduation, I had already been sober for over 2 years. That was around the time I started aging out of most teen recovery programs. A lot of the counselors I worked with only focused on youth cases, so I had to start finding adult support groups. I grew up in Los Angeles, but not the touristy part. My neighborhood had liquor stores every few blocks and corner shops with thick plexiglass windows. Alcoholism was really common and normalized. So, once the teen programs ended for me, I started going to early morning AA meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They were held in a small church near my school. I did not have first period on those days, so it worked out perfectly for me. After the meetings, I would usually stay for a couple extra minutes to write in my journal or just sit in quiet. One morning, this guy stayed after the meeting and asked me what I was writing. I told him that I was journaling. He said he liked the idea and wanted to try it for himself. After that, he started sitting next to me at every meeting, and we would talk a bit afterward. He seemed normal, and he was about my age. He knew I was about to graduate and asked if I planned to keep coming to that group during the summer. I told him that I wasn't sure yet. I had just gotten a job across town and I was looking into some meetings closer to where I would be working. I could tell that he didn't love that answer. Sometimes you can just see disappointment on people's face. I used to talk a lot in those meetings. I did not go just to sit in silence. I brought as much energy into that room as I could. I'd like to think I helped people feel a little bit better. I think he felt that too, and I think that's why he didn't want me to leave. People have told me that I talk too much, so maybe I'm just flattering myself and everyone else actually wanted me to be quiet, but I like to think that I was making some kind of difference. He asked me again when I would be switching to a different group. I said I didn't know yet. I told him I planned to keep on coming through the end of the school year. I don't remember if I ever told him the name of my school, but I always wore royal blue and gold. He knew I went to school nearby, just around the corner from the church. It wouldn't have been hard to figure it out. Then, in the last 2 weeks of my senior year, everything got wild. We had senior ditch day, late night hangouts, sleepovers, goodbye parties, etc. I missed the AA meetings at the church, and then I switched AA groups altogether. At graduation, everything was great, but then that guy showed up. It was so off. He didn't know me like that. I had never invited him. We weren't that close. But there he was, smiling at me from the back like it was completely normal. He came over afterward and said that he brought me a gift. It was a box of chocolates and a note about how much he would miss me. He said I should drop by the meetings again sometime. I uncomfortably said something like, thank you. I never went back. That whole situation was too weird. I didn't want to see him again. And then he showed up in my new job. I was working the cosmetics counter at a big department store. The cosmetics department actually had its own cash register. The first time he walked by, I noticed him. Then he came back the next day, and the day after that. He never spoke or asked for help. He just wandered around near my station, looking over at me like it was no big deal. He didn't even try to be subtle. Eventually I told one of my coworkers, the type of woman who doesn't play around. She walked right up to him and asked him what he was doing. She called him out in front of everybody. She said she knew exactly why he was there, that it was creepy and toxic. A few shoppers turned around to see what was going on. His face turned really red, and he walked away without saying anything. We told our manager afterward. The manager was glad that we spoke up, but reminded us to let her know right away next time. There was no next time though, since he never came back. I haven't seen him since, and hopefully he got bored and moved on. I don't really care to find out what he wanted. For some context, I had a really shitty childhood. It was terrible, where I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened through those years was from a mixture of sparse memories, things my family have told me about myself, and police reports. One of those things I do remember, however, is this lady I called Auntie. No first name, no last name, nothing else contributing to her identity. She was just Auntie. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old, sitting in her living room as she typed everything I said down on her laptop. I had no problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought she was someone I could trust, so I did. 7 years later, when I was 14, I admitted to her that I tried to kill myself numerous times. It was a mixture of multiple different factors: my mother's increasing toxicity, the lack of social interaction at the time, and most importantly, I never moved on from the horrors in my childhood. Now, as I said, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially to do with the fact that I begged her to tell me why I consistently wanted to die. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I could ever get the chance to see a different person, maybe get a different sort of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my auntie. Auntie, at the end of these sessions, would try to defend my mother, or make me seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time on why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I talked it up to her being empathetic. Maybe being able to explain why my mother was terrible was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way. And then, more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then, Auntie started to ask very specific questions, especially to the topics mentioned above. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things must be from the fact that at this point, she's known me for almost a decade. All the way into a year later, she started to bring up the parties I had gone to in these sessions without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of all, something that still affects me till this day. At the end of each session, Auntie had started to invite my mom into the room and tell her every single thing I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse that she had begun to put me through, said straight to her face as she sat next to me. My grades in school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. So I tried to kill myself on my 17th birthday. I ran into my mother's room looking for something that I could overdose with, or just something that could push me over the edge. I remember rummaging through everything, until I went into her walk-in closet. I had barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she even had one of these. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a shit ton of papers. The surprise of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in, and I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor and wondering what the fuck these papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Auntie and I's sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I did. I remember feeling sick, feeling so sick. I, at least, had enough sense to steal a few of those earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions, and I decided that night that I would kill myself after I figured out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed, because I really only had a year left to figure out what the hell was going on, before I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention in her sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance to, looking for some indicators that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about Auntie. She kept deflecting, repeating the same fact. She was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seemed like a small thing now, but at the time it was really life or death. My mother was in the shower, and I had already packed all of the stuff I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out of the house. I didn't even look down at the damn thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place, but even as I walked off the bus and years of texts were read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they call each other extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages, which was smart. I'll give credit where credit's due, but it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit on the side of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching up Auntie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave my body then. Sometimes now I swear I can still feel the same sick feeling as I felt then. I almost gave up. Almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers, because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name, some weird fake one, but when I clicked on her profile it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends, and I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of herself and my mother years ago. They have literally been friends, even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what the hell was going on. Why my mother had transcripts, why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said, and why she defended her. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beat black and blue for doing something that, quote, didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night is, who was Auntie really? And she couldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him, since we applied to the same university. He's one of my best friends now. What finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way, clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched up the username in the search bar, when it came up with Auntie's Facebook account. This psycho had been following me for God knows how long on my Instagram, and suddenly everything that didn't click finally made sense. The sudden precise questions, why my mother decided to suddenly isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her fucking bio. Tell me why it said, chemistry teacher with over 20 years, FML. I admit that I cried like a baby that night, because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything in my childhood, instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university. It really sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wish that I knew that sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist. Trust me, I did my research. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I was sitting in that guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me that we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do. I decided to post about my experience, just in the slight chance anyone had a similar experience with therapy becoming fucked up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys, it gets better, with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again.